A shimmering whisper crosses the ancient winds, carrying a warning older than kingdoms, yet newly awakened in our time. It calls out to those who watch the shifting borders of nations and the trembling pulse of prophecy unfolding before our eyes. The voice speaks of Israel standing again at the threshold of upheaval, where the weight of destiny presses on its gates and the shadows of the north gather strength in defiance of fragile agreements. It is said the uneasy ceasefire with Hezbollah trembles like a thin reed before an approaching storm, its surface calm masking waves of tension rising in secret chambers of power across the land. Warnings echo from Israeli officials who now urge Lebanon to dismantle the armed presence of Hezbollah, insisting that only the removal of their weapons can prevent dust from turning once more to fire. The prophecy seems to stir as leaders declare that the stillness at the border is not peace but hesitation. A brief pause before unseen forces decide whether restraint or conflict will command the next. Breath. And in the midst of this, Israel's prime minister is whispered to be charting a path shaped by a new global messaging approach. One born from the strategic mind of the late Charlie Kirk, whose influence continues beyond his. Final days. Netanyahu is said to be embracing a sharper, more unified communication stance, crafted to reach across continents and challenge the shifting narratives that surround Israel's struggle for security and recognition. The ancient words warn that when leaders adapt their voices, destinies pivot with them, for messages spoken to the world become the thread from which nations weave their courage or their downfall. With every statement, the atmosphere across Israel's northern frontier grows heavier, and the hills that border Lebanon seem to listen, as if expecting the echo of a forgotten battle cry. American officials gather in urgent meetings, seeking clarity from Israel on Lebanon's role and responsibility. As the future of the ceasefire becomes a question weighed carefully in diplomatic chambers, the prophecy's message deepens as Israeli intelligence claims that Hezbollah has not been dormant but steadily expanding its strength, quietly resupplying its arsenal under the cover of international uncertainty. Weapons flow like hidden rivers through channels carved by ambition, and every shipment threatens to unravel the threads of restraint that hold the ceasefire together. The ancient voice warns that when a warrior's arm grows heavy with weapons, the temptation to use them grows heavier still, pulling nations toward consequences they once swore to avoid. Yet amidst these tremors of conflict, another story rises, one of faith rekindled, of communities awakening, and of young Americans discovering spiritual paths they had long forgotten. The prophecy acknowledges that light often emerges during looming darkness, for hearts under pressure turn to a deeper truth, seeking purpose when the world feels too fragile to trust. Stories spread of individuals finding new strength in faith communities, their lives reshaped by spiritual revival that echoes like a soft song beneath the thunder of global unrest. This quiet awakening becomes a counterbalance to the turmoil in the Middle East, reminding the watchers that battles of the Spirit can transform the destiny of nations as powerfully as battles fought with weapons. Prophetic voices often speak in contrasts, revealing that renewal can rise in one land even as unrest stirs in another, forming an intricate pattern woven across generations. The warning continues. The growing threat along Israel's northern border is not isolated but part of a wider tapestry of tension, signaling a moment when history may shift swiftly and without mercy. Every report from Israel's defense circles carries the same urgency, insisting that Hezbollah's fortified positions now stretch deeper and stronger than any previous agreement intended to prevent. The prophecy whispers that when borders tremble, so do the hearts of leaders, and decisions taken in haste or hesitation can determine whether the land sees dawn or destruction. Diplomats from the United States continue pressing for stability, speaking of the delicate need for balance. Yet the underlying truth remains that conflict can erupt from even the smallest breach of trust. Hezbollah's growing influence is described as a vine twisting along the northern ridge, unseen by many yet gripping the stones tighter each day, waiting for the moment to break through. The ancient voice reminds us that when strength is gathered in secret, revelation often arrives in sudden, overwhelming force, shaking those who believe danger had passed. Israeli officials warn that their patience has limits, and the message to Lebanon grows sharper with each report of weapons being smuggled into hidden warehouses. The prophecy declares that a nation cannot walk forever between conflict and peace without the ground beneath it splitting into one fate or the other. Netanyahu's adoption of Charlie Kirk's messaging strategy signals a shift not only in communication but in posture, as Israel prepares to present its case before the world with renewed clarity. This approach seeks to counter narratives that paint Israel as aggressor rather than guardian, reframing its struggle as one of survival rather than ambition. The prophecy notes that words wielded with precision can be more influential than armies, shaping global perception and stirring alliances that determine whether nations stand or fall. The northern skies grow tense as observers watch for signs of escalation, knowing that even a single spark along the border could ignite a conflict far larger than the last. Hezbollah's actions are viewed not as isolated provocations, but as deliberate testing of Israel's boundaries, probing for weaknesses in international attention and political resolve. The prophecy warns that testing limits often precedes breaking them, and once the threshold is crossed, peace becomes a distant memory replaced by the march of inevitable consequence. Israel prepares contingencies, aware that its responsibility extends beyond its borders, for instability in Lebanon could ripple across the region and stir ancient rivalries anew. Meanwhile, voices of faith continue rising among the younger generation in America, forming a movement of renewed spiritual commitment that inspires communities to seek unity rather than division. This emerging revival stands as a testament to the power of belief during uncertain times, revealing that when nations shake, souls awaken with renewed hunger for truth. The prophecy offers hope in this awakening, suggesting that spiritual strength in one part of the world may help soften the impact of political turmoil in another. Israel's leaders weigh their choices carefully, understanding that their actions will echo not only through the halls of government, but through the prophetic timeline many believe guides the destiny of the region. The warnings from intelligence circles grow louder, declaring that Hezbollah's increasing stockpile of weapons could soon make the border untenable without decisive intervention. The prophecy underscores that when danger grows unchecked, it eventually demands response, and hesitation becomes a luxury that the guardians of a nation cannot afford. American officials express concern that the ceasefire may collapse if the situation continues deteriorating, urging renewed diplomatic pressure on Lebanon to rein in Hezbollah's expanding operations. The ancient voice hints that diplomacy must move swiftly, for the shadow gathering along the border does not linger forever. It either dissolves or transforms into a storm. Israel's new messaging strategy aims to rally global understanding before any decisive action is taken, ensuring the world sees clearly who seeks conflict and who seeks stability. The prophecy affirms that clarity in communication is vital when peace teeters on the edge, for misunderstanding can be as dangerous as military escalation. Hezbollah's resupply efforts are described as a deliberate challenge to the ceasefire, signaling their willingness to escalate despite international expectations for restraint. The ancient voice warns that when one side prepares for war while speaking of peace, the truth eventually reveals itself through action, not intention. Israel continues its warnings to Lebanon, urging them to dismantle Hezbollah's military presence before events move beyond control. Yet Lebanon's political fragmentation complicates any decisive response. The prophecy speaks of nations divided within themselves, unable to confront threats gathering at their borders due to internal weakness and fractured authority. As tensions rise, those who watch the region sense a convergence of political strategy, military readiness, and ancient expectation, forming a narrative larger than any single event. Stories of spiritual renewal among young Americans continue spreading, offering a counterweight of hope against the gravity of global unrest, reminding viewers that foundations of faith endure amid turmoil. The prophecy highlights that renewal often emerges when the world appears most unstable, offering light where darkness insists on growing and promising purpose where fear takes root. Israel's leaders look northward with guarded vigilance, aware that every day the ceasefire holds is borrowed time unless decisive measures are taken to address Hezbollah's strengthening foothold. The ancient voice declares that moments of hesitation are moments when destiny listens, waiting to see whether courage or caution will guide those entrusted with leadership. Meetings with U.S. officials intensified, filled with discussions of strategy, containment, and the fragile hope of preserving stability in a region long haunted by the scars of past conflicts. Yet, even as diplomats speak, the prophecy warns that forces beyond negotiation may soon shape events, pushing the region toward an inevitable reckoning if action is delayed. The messaging strategy inspired by Charlie Kirk becomes a central part of Israel's plan to align global perception with its reality, emphasizing urgency, clarity, and the moral weight of its struggle. The ancient words whisper that truth must be spoken boldly when the world's attention drifts, for silence allows deception to flourish in shadows. As the prophecy draws toward its warning, it reminds the listener that though conflict may seem imminent, hope still rises through faith, unity, and a people determined to stand firm against darkness. The young voices finding spiritual awakening in America symbolize a generation discovering purpose that may yet shape the future, influencing conversations and guiding hearts toward resilience. The prophecy concludes with a reminder that history moves in tides, some violent, some peaceful. And it is in moments like these that nations decide their direction and individuals rediscover their cal. LNG. For though Israel's northern border trembles and whispers of conflict swell, the unfolding story is not only of war but of awakening both in the land of ancient promise and in hearts across the sea.